welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave with you yet again. Hope you're doing well. Recording this in the month of May. It's going to come out probably in June, but hey, good podcasts are eternal, right? They just last and last and last. So getting ahead of my recording, it's a good way to stay on top of your podcast. And as things come to you, just hit record, create the episode, throw it in the calendar. It'll go out in the future, and give yourself some space. When you have time to record multiple podcasts, whenever you're in the moment and you have a few minutes, just jump in, just record your episode. You don't have to wait for the night before. This isn't exams in college and university where you cram all night and drag yourself to the exam hall. Nope, you can record and release it in the future and you're good. So that's what I'm doing. Again, it's in the middle of May. And you'll hear this episode in June. But I wanted to talk to you about how to build lasting brand equity with your podcast. And I got little stories for you to share, but I really want you to think about your podcast in terms of maybe some short wins, but also the power of a long-term goal for your podcast and how you can build that brand equity. You ready? Here we go. So at the time of recording this here in the month of May, my wife Jen and I are in the process of buying what will be our second rental property. We bought a rental property around 10 years ago. We own our own home. Well, we have a mortgage, but we're paying off our home, and we had some equity in our home, which we were able to take out and then go out and buy us a rental property, our first one. It's like a little one-bedroom condo, cute little apartment, has a full, nice, beautiful kitchen, in-suite laundry, which is a great thing. It's a little balcony, looks out over the Welland Canal, where all those ships go through here near Ontario, Canada. And a beautiful little condo, even has a wood-burning fireplace. Come on. And so we've had this condo for about 10 years now. And it's a nice little place. We've had multiple tenants, clean building, 4-story building. It's not a huge, big monster building. And we love it. It's great. And sometimes, to be honest, we actually forget we have it until the rent comes in and we're like, oh yeah, that's right. We own a rental property. So after 10 years of owning that rental property, we've actually got to the point now where we've actually paid it off. Right? Yeah. And now we have the equity from the rental property. So we've taken that out now. And then Jen and I are meeting with a real estate agent this week to go buy another property. Now, why are we doing this? Well, it's not because we're rich. Trust me, my bank account will totally disagree with you if that's what you think. We're not rich. We have our money tied up in this property. And our goal, we have 3 adult children. When our kids were little, Jen and I sat down and went, how can we do something for our kids for the long term so that they're set up properly for the future? And we decided that we wanted to have at least one property for each of the 3 kids, and then as well have a place for us to live. But that would be their inheritance from us and set them up for the future. By the time they get the properties, they'll probably mostly be paid off. And they can either live in the property or they can be a landlord themselves and then use that money to set themselves up for the future. Now, you're like, Dave, did we press play on the wrong podcast? Because why is this a rental thing? I want to talk about equity. Now, none of this would be possible on the meager pay that I get in my job. Trust me, it's not going to impress you much. The money that I make, my wife makes way better money than I do, and she deserves it because she works super hard at what she does. She's great. And so I'm not making a lot of money at all. It's enough to pay the bills, but we've been able to pay off our car. We've been able to do, now looking at our second property, it's all about equity. It's all about leveraging long-term plans to lead you to the goals where you want to be. And I think as podcasters, we need to leverage a long-term plan for our show, and that our brand is more than just a picture, a font, a color, a slogan, A brand is something that's built over time. For the first few years of Coca-Cola being out there, I'm sure that their brand had to be explained. What the heck is a Coca-Cola? I have no idea what that is. Did you just make those words up? Right? It took a while for people to understand the brand, the colors, the font, and what it was associated with. And now look at it, right? In every country in the world, you're going to see some sort of Coca-Cola something or other. Billboard signs, products on shelf in coolers, people having a Coca-Cola. It's just one of those things, right? And a brand takes time to build. Your podcast brand takes time to build. It's not going to happen overnight. And when you have a short-term focus for your podcast, I think you're missing out on the opportunity to build that equity, to build something that you can use to build further in your podcast. Just like we're using the equity in our home and in our rental property to take us further, you can take that brand equity and leverage it in the future to do all kinds of amazing things with and outside of your podcast. Your podcast has a powerful branding tool built right into it, and it's your brand. And you need to develop that over the long term. So what are some quick wins for building your initial brand equity? Some quick wins. You ready? Here's some. First, consistent, high-quality content and production values. By building this into your podcast, it's one of the ways that you can quickly build your equity within your podcast. Does your podcast have high-quality content? Or are you just kind of throwing it together in the moment because you really haven't planned it out and, you haven't really put any thought really into how it sounds or the production value? Remember, we are competing with other podcasts in the sense that some of these other podcasts have a team of 20, and here you and I are doing this by ourselves. But doesn't mean that we can sacrifice the quality of our content and how we produce it. We can still do a good job, even on a limited budget, and even with a team of one, we can still do a good job. And it'll help your brand grow and the equity grow within your brand. The next thing you could do is have an engaging personality and a unique voice or perspective for your podcast. Please don't sound like everyone else. Please don't sound like every other podcaster you've ever listened to. Please sound like you, because there's no one else that can be you, and you cannot be copied because you are you. There's no way that anyone can copy you and your show. So leverage your unique personality, your unique voice, and your unique perspective. That's going to make your podcast stand out and build your equity. Got it? Yeah. What else? Strategic cross-promotion on other platforms, within podcasting and outside of podcasting. Think of a podcaster who speaks on stage. Think of a speaker who has a podcast. See how that goes? It's not just within the context of what you're doing in your podcast. Your equity can be outside of your podcast. And these strategic cross-promotion opportunities with other podcasters, social media, your LinkedIn, your website, will all help you to build your brand and build the equity of your brand over time. Also, you can do guest appearances, which will help you to reach new audiences. Anytime you can be on a podcast is an opportunity for you to shine and for people to get to meet you who don't know who you are. Try it. And also optimizing your show notes, your descriptions, your podcast title, the name of your show, the name of your episodes. All of that information will help you to be discovered within the apps, within YouTube, within Google. You want to show up when people are looking for an answer to whatever it is they're looking for. You want to be the result that is offered up as the best result for the search at the moment. And these are some quick wins for your brand equity. These are things you can do from episode 1. Even before you hit record, you can start working on all of these things and have a clear plan on how you can have consistent high quality content, great production value, how you can increase your engagement, your personality, you leverage your unique voice and your unique perspective. Use those cross-promotion opportunities on all platforms guest appear on different podcasts, and then optimize your show notes, descriptions, and titles so that your podcast can be found. Those are quick wins. What about long-term goals for brand equity? These long-term goals will compound over time. When we purchased our home, we've sacrificed. We have had a lot of not fancy dinners and not going out and not spending money on extra things and putting our money towards our home, our mortgage, making it better, improving our home, doing gardening, making the place look nice, painting, fixing things, replace the furnace. We replaced windows. We've done all kinds of work on our home to make it better. So we need to do the work on our podcast, which will increase the value and equity of our podcast because we put the time and effort and expense. It's going to cost you something to do this. Cost us something to have a home. When we put that money in and invest in our home by giving it time and attention and the money to do it better, it's going to help us to build that compounding brand equity over time. And you need that for your show. So what can we do in our podcast that's going to compound over time and increase our brand equity? Well, first, we need to develop, and again, remember, this is over a long period of time, not in 10 minutes, okay? We need to develop a loyal and an invested listener base. How do you do that? How do you build a loyal, invested listener base? It takes time. It takes one interaction at a time. It's not something you can do or hire out to a VA or, give to someone else to do for you. You, as the host, need to develop your listener base. It's through interaction, genuine interaction with your audience. It's not something that you can do en masse with one click and automate. Nope. This takes time, a long time. So start now. That's the best time to start, right now. Also, just focus on becoming an authority and a thought leader within your niche. And for our friends in the US, your niche. By showing up on the mic, by creating content, by being there with the information that your audience is looking for, whether they're there to laugh or whether they're there to learn, whether they're to make them think, you're there and building this relationship with them, and you're becoming an authority in your subject. You're coming to this podcast to learn about podcasting. And now there's a ton of other shows that talk about podcasting, but they're not going to sound like mine because I'm the host of this show. I'm not the host of the other ones. So you're going to hear something different here that you're not going to hear over there. And you're not going to hear what they're saying on this show. It's just not going to happen, right? It's me. It's my view, how I'm working my podcast, and I'm trying to help you by bringing in as many voices in podcasting as possible. So become that authority. Become that go-to person that people look to because of your podcast. You can also expand into complementary content like videos, newsletters, events. There's things adjacent to your podcast we mentioned in the first part. Conventions, meetings, being a speaker, writing a book. These are all things they can expand your reach beyond your podcast. Also look through at monetization through, you can have sponsorships, affiliates, you can sell your own product or service, you can have donations through Buy Me a Coffee. These are all ways to build that long-term compounded brand equity. And people will get used to you saying, head over to my Buy Me a Coffee, head over to my website, here's my book. Over time and repetition, that brand equity compounds and builds and builds and builds. And then you can reap the rewards of that in the future. And then, as well, you can also, there's potential to launch a new podcast verticals under your brand. You can have multiple podcasts. Look what I'm doing. I have 8 different podcasts, all under the banner of True Media Solutions. Gives me the opportunity to reach a wider audience and not just talk about one topic. Do I advise you to have 8 podcasts? No, probably not a great idea for you and your schedule. this week alone, just to give you perspective on how goofy this is for me, this week alone, I'm going to have 28, yes, say that again for the people in the back, 28 interviews and pre-interviews for my 8 podcasts during the week for 1 week. That's 28 people I'm going to be meeting with at roughly an hour each. 28 hours of interview and pre-interview prep with my guests on top of recording my podcast, on top of editing for other people, on top of working a full-time night job, right? Do you see where I'm going with this? It's going to take time. And if you feel like me, where you have 1 foot in one world, which pays the bills, and 1 foot in the things that you love, podcasting, I feel like I'm on 2 different chunks of ice and they're moving away from each other. And I'm stretching it out as far as I can go with 1 foot on each piece of ice. And eventually I'm going to have to jump to one or the other. I'm going to fall in the water, right? So I'm going to be jumping away from a very boring and very unrewarding night job to doing more podcasting in the future. That's where I'm heading. But I'm stretching it out, people. It's taking so long, and I wish it happened tonight. I would love it. But good things take time. And the podcast takes time. Don't be in a rush. Do it the right way. The last part I want to kind of talk about is the power of audience engagement in relation to building your brand and the equity in your brand. When you come to the How to Podcast series, I hope you're picking up on a variety of things. I do things different episode to episode. I try to demonstrate for you the variety of ways that you can podcast, from interviews to co-hosted episodes, to solo episodes, to short episodes, to long episodes. I do mini-series. I do all kinds of different things so that you can kind of go, I've seen this before. Oh, Dave does that on his show. So there's some things I'd like for you to try for your podcast based on what I'm doing, and I hope you can just steal my ideas. Please, just steal them all. Take them and try them for your show, and let me know how they go. But this power of audience engagement will amplify your brand and really build that equity over time. It really will. So here's one thing I'm doing, is facilitating an active online community. Now, okay, I started an online community at the early days of my How to Podcast series. You go way back to like the first 20 episodes of the podcast, you're going to hear me talking about a community that I was trying to build, which absolutely no one signed up for. Total crickets. I set it all up. I paid the fees. I got the thing. I did the whole thing, set everything up, and I sat there by myself. I've tried Clubhouse. I was one of the early people in Clubhouse, and I was there for a while. And it's now become a place for salesmen to hang out. It's not good. I'm not enjoying. I left. But I created Clubhouse rooms and sat there by myself and went, I could be doing something much better with my time than sitting here in an empty Clubhouse room and there's no one here that wants to talk about podcasting, but yet they'll go to other podcasting rooms and hear terrible advice from really misguided gurus who tell you to do all sorts of really strange things. But no one would show up for my Clubhouse rooms. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like, well, third time's the charm. And I set up a meetup group. And from the moment we've started, it's just been building and building and building. And I got to tell you, it's the most rewarding thing on a Saturday morning to grab a cup of coffee, turn on my computer and head to my meetup group and meet with some of the most amazing human beings, fellow podcasters that you'll ever meet. If you're struggling as a podcaster and you're like, I I just can't stay motivated. I can't keep going. I feel like I'm all alone. I'm not getting any feedback. My listeners don't talk to me. Why am I even doing this? I'm not having a great time at this. I think I'm going to pack it in. Wait, hang on. Whoa, 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 whoa. What if you got into a room of other podcasters and told them that and let them build you up and give you ideas and support you on a weekly basis? Wouldn't that help? Oh, how much is that? Well, it's free for you. It's cost me money, but it's free for you. And I'd love for you to join us. So you can build a powerful and engaged audience by simply facilitating an active online community. I've set up Facebook groups and they're completely dormant. It's like another job to go in there and try to pretend to be all like, hey, everybody, hope everybody's good. It's like a comedian standing on stage and there's nobody in the seats. There's nobody there. You're like, well, why am I here? Ugh. So I'm closing those all down because they're not doing anything for my podcast and building community. But my meetups are going great. I've got 175 people have signed up to be part of our community on meetup.com. That's amazing. They don't all come at the same time. That'd be crazy. But the meetup group is growing. So what are you doing to facilitate an active online community? Have you even put any thought into that? Maybe you should. As well, you can also solicit listener feedback and involvement. If you're new here, I have a thing called SpeakPipe on my website at howtopodcast.ca. You can go over there and leave me a voice message. That way it comes to me. I can hear your voice. I can bring it into the podcast. It's right there. It's free for you to use. So what are you doing to solicit listener feedback and involvement? You can use polls and questions and secret words at the end of your podcast. And you can use your social media handles and all those things to encourage listener feedback. Are you doing that? You should. Maybe offer exclusive bonus content for your supporters. People use Buy Me Coffee has a whole store option where you can do some things through donations where your audience will be able to donate one time and get a special download or a discount or a ebook or whatever you want. It's really great. I love it. I'm using it myself. Also, you can do Patreon and have people donate on a monthly cadence. They can donate to you on a monthly basis and they're part of your community. So there's options for you. So definitely create some sort of bonus content for your supporters. You can also create opportunities for direct fan interactions. You can go through my Buy Me a Coffee and you can get a time on my calendar. I think it's $25. You can go in there and book time with me in my calendar. You get a special calendar link and you and I can have a one-on-one and I'm here to answer all your questions. It's built right into my Buy Me a Coffee. Try that. You can also then go to howtopodcast.ca and get in my calendar that way as well for free because you're listening to this. And you can get time with me as well. You don't have to pay anything. And you can get a 30-minute chat with me anytime you want, as many times as you want, right there on howtopodcast.ca. So what are you doing to create opportunities for your listeners to actually interact with you beyond listening? And then the last thing I would suggest is leveraging your listener data and your analytics. I've said this before. If you look at your last 5 episodes and you notice a new listen in a new city or country or wherever, and you see them coming back and back and back, you get that one listen in Boise, Idaho, then say, hey, new listener in Boise, Idaho, I see you. You've been here for the last 5 episodes. I see your listen. You're the only listener I have there. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear your voice. And invite them to leave you a message on your website through SpeakPipe or email. You calling them out and identifying them like that, when they hit play on the next episode and hear that, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, they know that I'm listening? That's amazing. it's a great way to call them out and invite them to respond. One thing else to consider in this conversation would be our call to action. In every episode, in everything you do, from your website to your podcast, your YouTube channel, social media, everywhere that you are, is make sure you have a clear call to action. You'll hear people call them a CTA. And basically, that is simply asking your audience to do something. They've been here through the podcast. They've listened to your content. They've interacted with you. They've seen you on YouTube. Now you're asking them to do something, right? And now, remember, the last thing we want to do is give our listeners and viewers a ton of homework, but we want to invite them to do something at the end of our content. To encourage our listeners to subscribe, follow, engage with us, to highlight the benefits of joining your community, your meetup group, to promote any current offerings, sponsorships, incentives, discounts, any of those things that would benefit them, not you as the host, would benefit your listener. And maybe tease what's coming up next on your podcast. That's a great way to build anticipation for your audience. Again, we're all about building over the long term and growing that equity within our podcast. Brand equity compounds over years of consistent podcasting excellence by delivering value, building connections, fostering community engagement. Your podcast can become a powerful long-term asset for your personal or business brand. I think all of us, myself included, have some homework to do when we talk about building our brand. Again, it's more than the image, it's more than the font, it's more than your colors, it's more than your album artwork, episode artwork, your website design. Those are elements of your brand, but your brand is really you. You are the brand of your podcast. It's not really a thing in the sense that it's some inanimate object or some picture. It's actually you. You on the microphone, you as a real human being with all of your flaws, your foibles, and all your silly little things that you do. The 10,000 times you say, so, like I do all the time. So, there, I just did one for you, just for fun. All of those things make you you. And that's why people come back for your podcast. They're not coming for your guest. They're not coming for the intro music. They're not coming for all of those other things. They're coming for you. And when you can connect with an audience member in a very meaningful way, in a consistent way, whatever consistent means to you as far as how often you release an episode, if you can do that, if you can show up and be you, be really you, the same you that would be you if I met you in public, that you, not some fake version of you, not some cleaned up, perfect, no ums, no ahs type you, the real you. The you on Saturday morning after a long week at work and you roll out of bed and look in the mirror, that's the you I'm talking about. That's the you. We need more of that. And it needs to come out in your podcast where you share stories, you bring people in, and people listening can go, yeah, I identify with that. I get it. I know what that feels like. I've been there. I've done that. I made that mistake. That's funny to me. All of those things are building bridges between you and your audience. So your brand equity takes time, but it will give you results that you can then multiply and invest in other places and do more over time. So don't rush this stuff. It took 10 years for us to get the money to buy our first rental property. It took many, many years to get to this part. And it's going to take many, many years to keep going further But once you've built it, it'll start working for you instead of you working for it. Brand equity is yours. There's some short-term things you can do, but I think you're going to see more benefit in the long term. So this means we need you to podcast a little longer than 7 episodes. We do. You're not going to get long-term brand equity from 7 episodes. We didn't get long-term equity from 7 mortgage payments. No. Been paying this mortgage for 20 plus years on our home. It takes time. Don't rush. Do the right things the right way, and then you'll see the benefit of your brand growing over time. Leverage that equity because it can serve you in your podcast. If you have questions about any of this stuff, A, you can come to howtopodcast.ca and you can reach me anytime. B, you can sign up for our meetup groups and come and join us and meet great people. Or C, keep listening to the podcast. Because if you've listened this far, there's a reason why you're still here. And I really do appreciate you for being part of the How to Podcast series. Great things coming up to support you on your journey as a podcaster. Because your story matters, you matter, your audience matters. And I want you to keep podcasting. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode of the How to Podcast series. Take care. We'll talk soon. Hey, thanks for being here on the How to Podcast series. Glad to have you on the show with us, listening in. And I hope they're finding value in the podcast. I hope you're finding something that helps you with your show, helps you with the tools and the information from these amazing guest co-hosts through our daily Daves and these solo episodes. The variety of what we're doing here on the podcast is all designed for you so that you can get the tools you need to create your podcast, to keep going with your show. That's why we're here. That's why I'm doing this. And I'm glad you're here finding value in this. If you would like to do a little bit more than just be a listener, if you want to do community with podcasters, we have a thing called our meetup on meetup.com. You can come find us, and there'll be a link on our website at howtopodcast.ca, and you can come and join in on our meetup. Instead of just being a listener, you could actually participate and come in and join other podcasters, just like you, at your stage, at your level, where you're at right now. And then other podcasters who are maybe a little further down the road, who can learn from you and you can learn from them. And we host these meetups on a regular basis. Again, go to howtopodcast.ca and you'll find all the information there. We'd love for you to come join us at our next meetup. The only thing we need at our next meetup is you. You're the only thing missing from all of this. So consider joining our meetups. Again, they're totally free on a regular basis, all through howtopodcast.ca. And I'd love to hear more from you about your podcast as well. There's a SpeakPipe link on howtopodcast.ca. Leave a message. I'd love to hear about you and your show and how we can work together to get your message into the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing the show with another podcaster that you're like, hey, I think you'd really like this episode. Go ahead, share the episode, and let's get more podcasters on the mic. Thanks for listening.